Welcome to our daily reflection for this Sunday, the first Sunday in Lent, February 18th. And of course, on this first Sunday of Lent, we're introduced in a big way to some of the key themes of this Lenten season. And really the purpose of Lent, as we'll see in several of these readings, is to draw us closer to God. That's the whole goal, right? If you have a good Lent or a bad Lent, the way you evaluate that is, did it bring you and draw you closer to God? That is the goal. Now, there's also what I would call a Lenten paradox that we have here in this mystery of Lent. And let's just start with the gospel. And Mark gives a very abrupt and brief view of this. Matthew and Luke give us a much longer treatment of Jesus' time in the wilderness, where he's tested by the devil. Mark is very brief and to the point. And Mark tells us that, Jesus is driven out by the Holy Spirit into the desert, and he's there in the desert for 40 days, and he is tested by the devil, and he was among wild beasts, and the angels ministered to him. Here is what I want to refer to as the Lenten paradox. He's in the desert, and there's wild beasts, danger, affliction, a poverty, and an impoverishment and a fasting. Physically. But then, in the midst of that physical affliction, there's spiritual consolation. The angels minister to him. And so what we see in Jesus is one of those spiritual laws, that when we sacrifice comfort, and we're in spiritual sacrifice, a physical desert, a physical affliction, there is an opportunity for spiritual consolation that we wouldn't otherwise receive and participate in. And this is one of those great Lenten paradoxes, that if we sacrifice in the flesh, we can reap a harvest in the spirit, right? Sow physical affliction and sacrifice and reap spiritual consolation. This is counterintuitive. And so many people in the world never experience these deeper spiritual consolations because they're afraid of the physical sacrifices, of making time for prayer. And what do I mean by that? For example, a lot of people start to pray, but as soon as they don't have any consolations in prayer, prayer becomes arid, boring, dry. Well, notice those terms we use for prayer. When prayer becomes arid and dry, sounds like a desert, doesn't it? It can be. Prayer, taking that quiet time with God, can become like a desert, arid and dry. And if we don't persevere through that affliction and discomfort, we won't experience the deeper consolations that can come in the Spirit as with spiritual insights if we persevere in contemplation. And that's what Jesus is promising us here in the gospel. And so we want to persevere, and that's going to be what we're called to. And that's really, oftentimes we neglect the second reading. I want to just jump to the second reading in this brief time. Obviously, the psalm is Psalm 25 about how God leads sinners on the way. And we want to be led during this Lenten season as sinners on the way of God, to God. Notice there's a path, a journey that's being evoked here in the readings. And then the second reading from 1 Peter gets us this idea of a path and a journey when he says that Christ suffered for sins once and for all, the righteous for the sake of the unrighteous, that, in other words, why does Jesus suffer? That he might lead you to God. In other words, Lent is about a journey. Jesus' sufferings and our own are to lead us on a journey to find out what authentic and true love is all about. And only by walking the path of true, authentic, self-giving love that requires sacrifice can we discover the God who is sacrificial love, who is authentic, true love. That is the goal of our journey in Lent. Let's not be afraid of the deserts and the sacrifices, because there's deep spiritual consolations ahead of us if we can but persevere. May the Lord give you the courage to do so, and may he bless and keep you. Take care.
This daily reflection is brought to you thanks to the generous support of the Mission Circle. Join the Mission Circle to help Catholics worldwide understand, live, and share their faith. Sign up at missioncircle.org today.